Hello, Internet. Take two. I started to stream and then realized my sound wasn't working. Checky. Hello there. 'Tis the weekend. These mean a lot more to me now that I'm um, working at the studio. Because, there we go, a little brighter. Um, yeah. I spend all week cracking away at deadlines doing prop design on FS for Family last couple of months, and some weekends I have a little more gas in the tank and can do my own stuff, or in the evenings after work. But it has been pretty intense. I've not been doing a lot of my own stuff, and the last little while my spare time has been going into training for full production starting in January, which means that I have to get better than a passing familiarity with Harmony, Toon Boom Harmony, which is the program that a lot of the final work is going to be done in. To that, hey, if you're part of my mailing list, I have a mailing list, you got an email this morning, and it was just like, hey, what's up? And by the way, if you happen to be looking for work, the studio where I work is looking for people, looking for talent. So here, let's look at that. This is the company application job application site. That's the way that sentence works. And so like, here, boink, close that for a second. We'll come back to that. You can see all the jobs. There are quite a number of possible positions, 2D and 3D, and TD. I'm not sure what TD is. Composing, design, rigging, lots of stuff. A lot of it is built around Toon Boom Harmony. And in fact, the founder of our studio is one of the developers of the program, so there's a strong connection there. And you know, to that extent, let's see. Actually, let me go to. I would have a copy myself. It is over here. There we go. Yeah. Let's go open this in the browser and take it. This is the email I sent everybody earlier on my mailing list. Boom. And so working on it for family, and I basically mentioned that we're looking for people, and if you want to have a job with us, aside from having the requisite like technical drawing skills, you need to know this program. I'm just going to close this for now. Dare to be you, dare to create. It's actually a pretty interesting program. I have a few little issues with its user interface. I think it could be refined, but you know, it's partially just because I'm familiar with other programs, and this one's new, and it just happens. Eventually, it'll get comfortable with it, and it is a very complicated program. It can do a lot of things. So, like a lot of variety of digital rendering and animating software, you'll find that it is quite heavily laden. The trick is don't try to learn it all, at least not all at once. So like right now I'm focusing on rendering and pre-rigging tools. So I'm learning how to take my basic work that I'm doing in Clip Studio and Photoshop and transpose it to Toon Boom, draw it out with a 1 or 2 pixel line, and make sure my vectors are nice and clean. It means using a lot of the ruler tools. For F is for Family, it's a very technically tight show. You can see the hint of the style up there. It's got a little bit of the feel of things like All in the Family, or not All in the Family, although it does remind me of All in the Family. That's an old live action TV show. Family Guy, that's what I was thinking of, and The Simpsons. But it's this different drawing character, a little closer to real, and a little more less round than both of those. That's one way to put it. Like there's a lot of rounding, but there's also more boxiness, and then a lot of the backgrounds and props are really close to real, like simplified, very simplified, but based on the real forms. We're not doing nearly as cartoony creation of objects and stuff. And then you apply this essentially a 1 or 2 pixel line to it. It's very, very thin line. That's one of the things that people are getting wrong in a lot of tests. That's very fixable, but the problem is that when you're rendering in Harmony with a thicker line, not even super thick, just like a 5 or 6 or 12 pixel line is what I see a lot of people using. It looks chunky and it's pleasing to the eye, but when I drop it down to the 1 or 2 we're going to need, what you find is a lot of the bits of line don't actually touch each other. They don't meet. Because you're rendering with a big thick line with rounded ends, and they appear to overlap when they don't. And you actually really don't want that a lot. Almost all the lines should be connecting. A form should be one consistent vector that I can grab and move around fairly consistently without the chunks falling apart. So you want your vectors to be rendered with more of the drafting tools and less freehand drawing. And you want to know what you do with your node view, which is the rigging side of things and how pegs work. That's something I'm learning right now. I'm going to be spending the next 2 weeks doing a deep dive, and I've looked it over a couple times, and I conceptually understand, but I want to apply it to some of my first designs, and that's where the real learning is. You put it in an application on something and spend a couple weeks actually making all the mistakes. So that's what I'm going to be doing in my spare time, unpaid, but self-training. We're also going to have a quick couple of training sessions at the beginning of full production in the new year, but that's more like workflow oriented. You want to know the basics, and then if you're interested, if you're artists, so I sent this to my mailing list. A lot of them are old students of mine, and also some just people in the arts who like comics and stuff and followed what I do. That's like a little over 1,000 folks, and I linked to Toon Boom, including specific videos that are relevant to the tools that.
We're taking a look at Harmony.
Pause that, I don't want the sound. It's like the pencil tool and other things. Not everything, but a lot of the key ideas. I've given you a cheat sheet. And I think I'll link to this email in the chat on this live stream, which is over here. There you are. Hello. Here's the mailing list with all the links. So we're looking for crew. There's a run on talent right now, and it's been a little challenging to find people. We had a couple lined up that looked good, but for various reasons it didn't work out. We need people to be in Montreal for our production, so I don't think it's exclusive, and it's not about being able to get to the office, although eventually they will want to open the studio, but it's more a question of how the studios run and the kind of support they get through tax write-offs and stuff. So they need people to be in Quebec. That wasn't made as obvious to me earlier on, but it seems to be more of an issue. And then also, you have to be a Canadian. We will have some freelance work for people who aren't in Montreal or not even Canadian. But for the department I'm running, it needs to be more local people. And it's basically going to be a full-time job. It'll be interesting. It's going to go until, I think, April-ish is the run of my job on it. And it'll be interesting. I don't have a plan for what's next after that. After I've done this bit of animation, it's the first time I'll be back in animation for a while. In a while. It has been the first time. There we go. Get my sentence correct. And I may well stay in it for a while because I was looking for. I spent the last couple of years sort of eyeing to make a jump like this. I was sort of thinking about gaming, maybe. But I have less DNA in gaming in the end because I don't play a lot. I have Steam and I've got a couple of games loaded, but I haven't really played them a ton. I'm not a big video gamer. But I grew up around animation. As a little kid, I grew up. My mother was a layout artist and then storyboard and story directing, and then ultimately a director at Nelfina Studios in Toronto. So when I was a little kid, she first started, they were working on Rock and Rule, which is a very cool film. And then went on to worked there myself in the 90s on a bunch of stuff. Eek the Cat and Sam and Max and Wayne Head. What else did I do there? Was that it? I think there was a fourth. Well, and I came back and did storyboard cleanup for Franklin. That might be what I was thinking of. And it's a very different studio now. It was already a different studio when I worked there from when I grew up, although it was more similar. It was the same building still. And then eventually we moved to the Carpet Factory. Well, the studio didn't completely, but the production I was on moved to the Carpet Factory, which is this huge building I used to have fantasies about. This epic, long, massive thing in the west end of downtown Toronto. Excuse me. Yeah. Yeah. And I used to dream about, like, wouldn't it be cool to, like, own all that and gut, like, 2/3 of it. I mean, just hollow it out so it's a wall, it's a shell, and then have inside, like, a forest with waterfalls. It's many stories tall. And have vines crawling on the walls. It'd be cool. I lived in a warehouse at the time myself, so it was sort of part of... Or I actually, not at that point, I didn't live in the warehouse anymore, but just before that, I lived in a warehouse. So I had, like, fantasies about getting back into a warehouse and having kind of an interesting, oversized, creative space. It would still be very cool, but I don't have expectations of having that kind of moolah. And then when I came to Montreal, I worked at Cinegroup for a while on Fact 2. And I did some freelance from home for a couple of productions, and then got into doing TV stuff with an art director named Steve Henry, who's still around. He worked on the what do they call it again? Teen Titans. There we go. The Teen Titans TV series and a few other cool things. It's based out of Toronto, and then got away from all that because I was doing, like, my own comics and I was trying to get more freelance illustration work for a while there. And I even ultimately a couple of years ago got myself an illustration rep, which was looking great. The first year I had them, it didn't take off like wildfire, but there was a couple of really exciting big job bites that came along, and then several decent size. I made a good living the first year with them. Second year was the beginning of the pandemic this last year, and it pretty much died on the vine. I'm sure it'll come back, but right now things are kind of dead in the illustration work. So and teaching wasn't going to really cover the bills anymore. So when the opportunity to make the jump, because I'd been thinking, at that point when I started thinking this, I'd been teaching for 5 years, and I haven't done anything career-wise for more than 5 years. Mostly because it just gets repetitive and stale for me. All work and no play makes Max a dull boy. So I'm used to anticipating and planning for a shift in careers, especially because also that's partially my reason, my motive. But another thing, reality is I've lived through multiple recessions and changes of industry and market media platform changes, And just the reality is a lot of the jobs that I've done, shortly after I move into another sphere, they become defunct, and it's kind of the motive. Like there will be opportunities to change up and retrain, and eventually, like for animation, I'm coming back to it and retraining with new tools. But there was a period there, right about when I started looking elsewhere. I didn't respond to it. It sort of happened afterwards. I kind of anticipated it. Not consciously, just that I always feel like this sort of thing will happen, so I anticipate it and make the move to fresher grounds for my own brain's sake. And usually what happens as well is that the economy and culture and trends in an industry will shift so that in around the 5 or 6 year period, there's a transition and growing pains that come with that. And so animation is coming out of that now, doing well. There's some new software for me to pick up. I'm good with that. I've taken 3D Coat classes at SynStudio. I wouldn't say I've mastered it, but I got familiar with how it works. I was going to do ZBrush and what's it called? I installed another one that's free that I have. I think I still have. I just haven't used it. What is that one called, it's Open Platform. Do I still have it on my computer? Excuse me. I can't remember now. It'll come to me when I'm not thinking about it, but there's a very popular, extremely powerful 3D rendering and video editing program that I looked at and figured it'd be a good one to learn, and I will come back to someday. But now here I am doing 2D animation design, which is cool. It's very close to my original wheelhouse. Wheelwell work, so it's more my life story. And I'm just having to pick up Toon Boom. So yeah, I think I showed you guys this already, but just a reminder, yeah, if you're interested and you're looking for work and you want to make a similar kind of jump, lateral shift career-wise, a lot of animation studios are hiring. My job is at Oasis Animation. You can see there. And these are all the jobs available, including my department, cleanup artist for props. So if you think you're interested, check out the mailing list that I linked to. Is this email, mailing list post, Toon Boom. These are some of the tools you need to use, not all of them, but some of them. Check out the job listing description. Let's put that in the text too. It's actually in that email as well. But jobs here. Lowering jobs, doctoring jobs, jobs for you and me. That's an old SCTV quote. But these are just animationing jobs. But it's actually been a lot of fun. Oasis is a pretty fun studio to work at in terms of the culture. Reality is, if you're a freelancer, yeah, every studio is going to have pluses and negatives. Like, one thing that I'm missing is the freedom to get up when my body says it's time to get up, as opposed to doing 9 to 5. Makes me appreciate weekends a lot more again. But it's not nearly enough. 2 days is not enough. We need 3 or 4 day weekends, man. Oh well. C'est la vie. So, with that, I thought I would talk about one of the things that I've noticed with the application so far is that first of all, you have to know Toon Boom, know the tools. A lot of people coming in, they figured out that the drawing program they're using to draw, but they're not matching the style of the show. Match the style, whatever the show is you're applying for. Go look it up, learn the style, practice a bit, match it. Don't rush that. Second, part of the style of the show is a particular specific kind of use of perspective we use, which is a really middle of the road perspective style. So, to that end, I thought I would talk about perspective a little bit. I haven't taught a class in a couple weeks. What? You choosing intentionally to go and teach something? Well, yes, a little bit, sort of. Something that comes up a lot in like half the tests. A lot of the tests. A lot of them are based on a prop that I did. Let's see. I think I can open it in another program and prep it for you guys. But they're doing something that speaks to learning to use perspective for pizzazz and lots of. Actually, literally what I'm doing, forced perspective at the camera, dramatic forms. So this camera, like most cameras that you see used on phones and in popular use, is a slightly wide angle camera. So this rectilinear box has a lot of forced perspective. And that meaning that the apparent distance between here and here is significantly wider than the distance back here. And likewise, this plane much longer than this plane optically. Not in fact, obviously. It's a rectangle form. But that's how perspective works, right? And the issue here is that the vanishing points of this plane, let's see actually what planes you guys are seeing. This plane and this plane, because it's a wide angle lens, have been constrained and pulled in to make that difference and transition from front to back more dramatic. It's great visually for punchy, dramatic, cool shots. So, for example, what tool am I using? I have, hang on a second. Is that the thing? Is that the problem? There we go. Yes. I had to change my brush tool settings. And you're in the wrong window, buddy. So that's over there for what I needed. Okay. So that's your right vanishing point. A lot of people will overemphasize, by the way, the importance of the horizon line, but it is a key component to the fundamental concept of perspective. Just don't overemphasize its importance, because as soon as an object is not in alignment with the ground, the level of the ground, the horizons is only a reference point to what the camera's doing, not what the object is doing. So if I want to do a cool car coming at me after jumping over something, then having a vanishing point that's relatively close and compresses the object a lot helps me get really dramatic distortion and proportions front to back. I'm not trying to draw a good car here. I'm just doing the crude shapes, but illustrating the point, like the width of the front plane here, where the front grille of the car is. And the size of the back versus the front. And the width of this space versus this space where the rear wheel is. And this space up front where the front grille is. Much more dramatically defined by this sort of forced perspective portions. It looks good. This is the kind of stuff that a lot of people gravitate towards and use a lot, including me. There's nothing wrong with it either. In fact, for personal exciting stuff and actiony stuff and superheroes and all of that, even some animation jobs, this is really important to be able to do. But it's not what we're doing on our show a lot. Some, occasionally, but most of the props are going to have something a bit more like this. Let's go back to red and my thin line. Hang on. I'm just going to take all this, move you over here. First of all, a lot of the props aren't cars. We're doing those with CGI. One of the props in the test is a baby seat. And a lot of people are taking the difference between the front, where the front of the seat is, and the back of the seat, and making it really dramatically different. I'm not drawing exactly the prop, actually. I was going to pull it out and show you. But you know what? I don't need to do that. Let's do just a rough sketch that's approximating the kind of shape that I can do in a quick freehand thing, rather than trying to get into drawing the whole thing. So for the actual test, we're doing a lot of drafted lines. You'd be using a rulered line, or this kind of line where you do that for the lines instead of freehanding them. But for my quick explainer here, this is what we're looking for. Minimal, this distance between here and here is very similar to the distance up here, as opposed to what we're seeing a lot, what I'm seeing a lot in the ton of the tests, is super forced dramatic pinching of the objects. Where the difference between the front of the object and the back of the object is very pronounced. So like the vanishing point for this drawing is there. The vanishing point for this drawing is like much further away, like there. You know, not just higher though. And you don't want to pull the sides in so much. The thing to look for is that the space even between here and here, or here and here, isn't so much shorter than the space right there. And this is a common perspective fault as well, in terms of if you have an object like this in an otherwise less forced perspective environment, it can be interesting, but it implies that things coming right at the camera. And if it's not one of those things, if it's further back but has those forced angles on it in an environment that is like my two walls here that don't have a lot of forced angles on them, then it'll look a little incongruous. And congruous? Am I saying that word right? You know what I mean. It'll look out of place. Your eye will immediately go, what? That's wrong. The other thing that you see a lot, and I saw with one of the tests, and I think that in this case what the person was doing was not redrawing enough. They were just taking the objects and trying to push them around and warp the forms, but they weren't close enough to what they were at. But they were doing stuff where, so this is one point. If you have an object that's got 2 points, this wide angle, so curvilinear effect perspective, brings in and bows and dramatically exaggerates. So it's bringing in those vanishing points into the frame and creates this round curvilinear sense of space. So these are the vanishing points. And this, having them two of them live inside of a relatively standard frame, that's the aberration. That's not how your eye works. It's not how, I mean, we don't have a frame either, but if you thought about a frame that's this big, you can't bring all of your vision into that. So when you do compress all your vision into that, you create this distortion and forcing. A lot of what we're doing in FSR Family and a kind of mid-range perspective utility that you're going to want to master is having the ability to think about and draw things where the vanishing points fall off frame, point to something way outside the shot. And so the form, if you're doing just say a simple cube, doesn't feel forced or warped or distorted. It's relaxed. And in fact, you can draw a fairly passable, unwarped looking box without thirds and fourths because of that. The second you bring in your points, so let's make 2 points in here now. If you don't have a third and fourth, you get that super compressed feeling that looks actually like it's not a cube anymore. It looks more like this would be a triangle. Except it's not a triangle. That's not what I was trying to say. So what in truth you need to do is think in terms of a much larger picture plane, even bigger. Essentially square. So quick tip, 3-point perspective kind of needs a square canvas if you're going to fit all of the vanishing points on it, because if this is the middle of the object, there and there and there, then the third vanishing point needs to be as close or close to as close, like relatively nearby, and the one below as well, or the angles are going to get kind of funny feeling. In fact, so that's still going to be a compressed thing. So I want, here's my vanishing point, here's my vanishing point, and let's do in blue the right version. So, and I'll show you why it's the right version. Flip. So this is optically correct. Yeah. 4-point It's not going to be a cube actually, just because the length of it is too tall. But this standing rectangle, let me just emphasize the lines a bit so it stands out better, should feel like looking at a tall box, say, you know, literally I'm just filling it out because I think, you know, technically the horizon line should be where your head's at, but the slight distortion I've gotten to this drawing makes this one feel, and this is what I was saying at the beginning. In the end, always trust your instincts for how things look right. About that tall to a person. So we're looking at it, our head's here, and we're looking up and down and to the sides, and this distortion of form is going to feel relatively accurate. Now, for F is for family, the catch is that we're not using 4 or 3 points, so you won't get this rounding. We'll use 1 or 2 point. And that means that for our show, what you might get would be, let's do this. Do that lighter and make it a layer. There. And because we're not constraining for this, you always want to allow for a little more width for the form to feel like it's undistorted, uncompressed version of itself. So let's put in that little figure guy again in our new layer so we can keep him. That's the F is for family version. More boxy, more clean, none of that rounding and warping, and none of the not too much of the pinching. So if we get back to our baby seat again, we want angles that stay, the width stays relatively consistent from front to back on the object. There's a little bit of widening, perspective is there, but it's gentle. It's relatively soft. So the angle here, we can't see it, but I'm going to draw it like it's see-through, and the angle here, very close to each other. Not the same, but very close. I see a little less of this plane than I do of this plane, right? But not dramatic pinching. Put that over here where you can see it. Versus, so it's a front view people are often doing. Let me do the draw over of a front view that's got the kind of warp that I'm seeing in objects. We don't want this, which looks like we're putting the camera like a foot away from the base of this baby seat, and it's being looked at through a fisheye. You know, that's, oops, those are pencil lines. Not that. And it's going to vary, obviously. This isn't a right or wrong thing. This is about when you apply to do a show, you want to look at the show and try to eyeball and match the style guide. So like my test for this series was a telephone. Actually a couple objects. A telephone, a magazine, and a broken TV. Well, broken and unbroken. So let me show you. This is what I sent them to get the job. If you've been on this channel before, you might have seen it even. That one and that one and that one. Do I have? Oh, there we go. I want one without the show logo. There we go. So this is my telephone. And this isn't cleanup. I had to just draw these and clean them up, show that I could do the things. And I did even harder than I needed to. I did the construction work to build the dial. I would, on the show, I would probably use the rulers. but I didn't think of that at the time. I was still getting used to using Clip Studio and hadn't gotten into the habit of using the rulers. Notice things like the chord is very controlled form. It's not spongy and rubbery. Yeah, pretty tight. And then this was a magazine with the character done kind of on style for the show, the way the characters are drawn. And a TV. And you'll notice the limited, there's some variation in the angles, but very limited variation in the angles from this side to that side. Some distortion, but not a lot. Next to none going along this plane. It doesn't feel forced. We're not looking at it through a fisheye lens. And when you're learning how to draw in perspective, people often, again, make the mistake of really focusing on the sort of sexy, fun, curvilinear stuff. It seems flashy and challenging and exciting. And I'm not saying don't learn it. It's actually really good to learn. I love using it. But for commercial work, for professional work, you don't want to be locked into just training in one style. And, you know, you really don't want to think about perspective as an opponent. That's a lot of people's problems. They're afraid of it. They avoid it. And then because they're so afraid of it, they build up this expectation. And then just to do it, you have to overcome your expectation. You've booby-trapped yourself. It's really not that complicated. It's just procedural and acquires a little bit of attention to detail. And if you enjoy and get excited about the process of figuring it out so that you can expect the work to be kind of fun, it becomes very enjoyable. I like doing perspective drawing. It's not a big obstacle. Certainly some complex forms are like, ooh, this will take a little longer than an hour. Hey, you like drawing, don't you? That's why you should be doing it. I mean, yes, it's really nice to get to make a living as an artist and a privilege, but I also do it because I like it. That's why I started doing it in the first place. If you're gonna draw for a living, you better expect to also like drawing, because otherwise it's a terrible way to make a living. How tedious. Yeah. And I mean, of course, yeah, sure, you could always avoid stuff that requires you to draw in perspective and learn how to figure that stuff out. But that's difficult. Any style that you, as a commercial artist, anytime you develop a style that's built around avoidance, or as I've some people jokingly refer to it, my style is defined by my collective failings and weaknesses. It's cute. It's a funny joke, but it's a terrible way to work, and you shouldn't deal with. I was talking to another cartoonist friend of mine on Facebook. He posted he was thinking about using pseudonyms. I use a pseudonym. Salgood Sam is not my given name, but he was talking about like inventing one to try things out and make mistakes so it didn't hurt his brand. And like, oh, that's a terrible way to go about it. No, make making mistakes part of your brand. Learning from your mistakes part of your brand. Adam Savage is the example I gave him of like one of the best I can think of, who's done well. And he makes screwing up and figuring out how he screwed up and doing better part of his creative identity, so that he doesn't feel obliged to sort of fulfill some idealized notion of perfect. Don't do that. You're going to be a better artist and technically more proficient if you jettison that concept entirely in the first place. Just chuck it. Forget it. Perfect's a waste of time. Learn how to do things technically, and then have a fuck it clause. Allow for slack and don't get into personal self-recrimination and judgment and condemnation. I suck. This doesn't work, therefore I suck. That doesn't help anybody, at least you. So made me think about it in terms of, this isn't working for some reason. Why isn't it working? Try to analyze that, identify it, and then focus on addressing those the next thing you do. And so like my personal developmental philosophy has always been, whatever I do next, I want to make it a little bit better than the last thing I did of its kind. And improve just a bit more, get a little better each time. Identify a thing, improve on it, make it a bit better. And just incrementally get there. And it's not like a piecemeal or MediaCore aspiration. It's a realistic one. I'm not racing anybody else. I'm just trying to improve on my own best performance. And if you draw a lot, that process can be very rapid. You know, many small steps get you there quickly. Just take many small steps. If you're afraid to and hesitant to and avoid taking steps at all, you get nowhere slowly. So take many small risks and figure it out bit by bit. And don't judge yourself for not quite matching up your expectations. Just try to figure out what fell short and make that a little better next time. And then build your brand around that realistic depiction of what it takes to get where you want to go. People will enjoy the journey with you, hopefully. You'll get good and possibly great. But, you know, this pen name, Salgood Sam, initially it was Salgood Sam in my head. Like, it's my name, Douglas, Max Douglas, spelled backwards, with 2 letters changed. But in my head, when I initially did that, I thought it would be pronounced Salgood, as in Saul, like Better Call Saul. And I just sounded like it was a fun spoonerism-y sounding, and rolled off my tongue in a nice way. And Sam was a favorite grandfather. So Salgood Sam was a fun name. But then my roommate, like a day or so later, pointed out to me, actually, most people will read it as Salgood, as in it's all good. And it made me pause for a bit, but then I decided, yeah, you know what, I kind of like that, because it's a braggadocio. It's not exactly like, it's all amazing. It's fantastic. No, it's just good. And try to be good, try to be my personal best, and make that best a bit better. And I kind of like that as a subtext, not just even for other people or as a braggadocio, but as a reminder to myself, that is my intent going into this. As opposed to getting caught up on unrealistic expectations. I certainly am susceptible to worrying about my career, my brand, as everyone is. But keeping in perspective is important. And Salgood Sam helps me do that. It helps me remember that I'm not here to try to amaze you or be a genius. I'd like to occasionally do so, but it's not my goal. My goal is to do good work and to have fun doing it. And hopefully make a decent living, which so far I'm managing to do. All right, that's enough for the process pod. No more actual proper process pod, not just me drawing. I'm going to now go draw. I figured this time would be good to do a little bit of demo drawing, talk about stuff relevant to the job thing. By the way, so I think I mentioned this already, but again, along with my little notes about the kind of perspective and control of form and drawing chops that we're looking for, in the page here, we'll get all of the kind of other like basic requirements, both in English and French. Studio works it's bilingual. We work a lot in English, but there's also French, and you can take it as an opportunity to work on your French. I've been trying to, but also I linked to my email, and again, I linked to some of the specific types of skills that you're going to want to focus on if you're new to harmony and you're going to try to apply while not having a whole lot of experience. Practice it first too. Don't make the test your practice. We're gearing up in the new year, but we're going to probably still be looking for people because didn't find as many as we want. So you got a little time. Make it count. Make these holidays count. That's what I'm going to be doing. All right. By the way, you can still, someone just did, and I don't think they got charged. You can still join my Patreon. You'll see a link in my description text. The reason to do so, aside from getting access to all of my student patron posts, even if I'm not really currently taking on students, so I've been freezing my all payments for the last little while. I believe we'll see. You can see I have 38 nominated right now. You could peek behind the scenes, but you see here I'm not taking payments, and on February I'm going to do this again. As long as I'm working on the studio, I'm suspending the Patreon. So you could join my Patreon and get links to my videos in your inbox. But the main thing is you get the Patreon library. So it's an access to all of these digital copies of all my independent comics and things, zines, graphic novels. Huge pile of reading material you can stick on your Kindle reading device or whatever it is you happen to use. Also, if you stick around long enough and payments get over a certain threshold, basically starting around $20, I start sending people books anyway, just physical copies. I'll order your copy, send it to you. You also have access to all of my videos that I post here. I kind of use this work blog pretty actively to document what I'm doing and what's new. Sorry, it's jumping around there a little bit. I'm not paying attention. There's a past video for me. There's progress on the Bloom Grounding for Lessons horror story that I've been working on. I paused after doing 4 pages. I got 4 more to do, but it's it'll come pick up again soon. And I'm also doing, I think up here you'll see, yeah, I'm working on my memoir. There we are, that's that there. I'm really happy with this page. That came out well. And I think the one before it. So these were all pure digital pages done in Clip Studio that had a more sketchy feel, which is the modality I'm going for in this story. I've been working on another one that's the digital version of this. No, there it is, this one. But I don't know. I'll come back to it. Right now, I feel like it's being influenced by my design work on F is for Family in a way that it's not quite in that feeling style. It's a little too clean. We'll see. This one of the things about this story is that it's very much it'll vary stylistically constantly because it's memory driven. So it shifts around and looks a little different from page to page to sort of mirror the nature of memory. So you'll get posts like that. You get to read all my comics. You can definitely check out all of the student patron posts and lessons that I've posted. There's like entire course outlines there for my 3 courses at Sin Studio. I'm not currently looking at homework or taking payments and all that kind of stuff, but there's access to all that material. And yeah, read my comics. So hope you're doing well. Look forward to your holiday weekend and all that sort of stuff. And I will see you around the internet. Keep on doodling. Remember to do it, for the love of it, sure, but pragmatically and practically as well, and efficiently. And if you want to do it professionally, keep in mind the demands of the work, and don't fudge on and cheat on learning the skills you'll need to do them, because it ends up just stressing you out later on. By cheat, I just mean try to avoid a key skill that you're going to need to do in the job. Some people will try to do that, work around it, and it usually ends up blowing up in their faces. A little bit. I'm very pragmatic, so part of that is also that I will often just focus on the things I need to do for the job and not worry about or focus on those that I don't. Well, I don't. Right then. Hope you're well. Stay safe. Wear your masks. Wash your hands. Get vaccinated. Yeah, it's good.